So we want to have a warm welcome listening and watching us. This is going to be a very interesting podcast. We are so excited to have Dr. Kingsley Ekwemalor with us today. Dr. Ekwemalor is an associate professor at North Carolina A&T State University. He's also an immunologist. He has so many expertise about the immune system, and he's worked extensively, and his work really shows his work in animal studies with ruminants and even bovine all indicate this extensive research area expertise in immune system. Dr. Ekwemalor has won multiple awards. He's authored so many papers, presented at so many different international, local, and even regional conferences. He's a passionate mentor. He's mentored so many students, undergrad and graduate students, and he's passionate also about making sure that there's proper representation and training for underrepresented population in immunology, in genomics, and in genetics as well. So I'm hoping we're looking forward to having a great conversation. And we'll be talking about immune intelligence. So, and we'll try to have the conversation from the perspective about the immune system for even the non-science person. So you're welcome, Dr. Ekwemalor, and we are so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Sarah.
you're welcome. And I think you have so much experience when it comes to research in immune system, immune response, both innate and adaptive immunity. And in our conversation today, we've had already questions that have come in from students. And we want to kind of look at the immune system from a different perspective. So we know that our body has its own front line of defense when it comes to the immune system. And just take us through, first of all, what is innate immunity? Or what is the immune response? Or how does our body fight infection without us taking medication or getting any treatment for that?
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Thank you for having me on your podcast. And I will go ahead and thank you for a good introduction as well. And first of all, I'll start by defining what are pathogens. And again, because they are the one causing these effects on our body. And we know that pathogens are microscopic organisms that cause diseases. And if we're giving, okay, what are examples of pathogens? We're talking about viruses, we're talking about bacteria, we're talking about fungi, protozoa. And they all attack in a different way, in a specific way. And our body is also able to respond in a different way. And then what happens when our body encounters this pathogen? And that's what immunity is all about. Our body is trying to resist this infection and again fight these diseases that these pathogens also bring along. And how does the body fight it? Again, there are a lot of cells involved, and again, we see tissues involved, and also that's where the immune system comes into play. And again, we've talked about the immune system, and we know the immune system is divided into two. We have the
Okay.
innate, and also we have the adaptive immune system. And when we look at the innate immune system, is the body's first line of defense against any of this pathogen. How it
Okay.
responds, again, is just like, somebody tapping you behind without seeing the person, and you just respond immediately without knowing, is that my friend or my foe? So the body
Mm,
is just responding to infection. And how does it do that? There are a lot of key players when it comes to innate immunity. And like we said, the immune system is divided into two, the innate and the adaptive immune system. One is rapid in response. Again, it's like, I just want to get rid of whatever is in the body. And it does
okay.
that one by physical barriers. And an example of a physical barrier will be our skin, our mucous
Okay.
membrane. It also does that by phagocytes, again, which we're talking about neutrophils. Neutrophils are also known as first responders, just like we have our police, our firefighters. Once we call 911, they show up. Same thing
To
when it
help.
comes to our body. Once they recognize these pathogens, they show up. And again, we also have macrophages. The body also responds by also causing inflammation, again, which is a
Okay.
response to injury or infection. Again, that brings immune cells to that side of infection. Just
Okay.
similarly to our police officers, when we call them, they want to know what's your address, what's your location. So again, they're able to recruit, cause inflammation, and again, our body responds. And that's why sometimes when we go to the hospital, the doctor
Mm-hmm.
asks, what are some of those symptoms that you're exhibiting? They look at your body, your temperature is high. That's also a way our body responds, because our body is able to, again, raise the temperature to hinder those pathogens, again, from growing as well. And then
Okay.
also, they also respond by also producing interferons. Again, these proteins are very vital to how the body
Okay.
fights infection. And again, also by complementation system, whereby, again, the body produces, these proteins that, again, we're going to
Okay.
talk about as we progress along, that
In
helps
there.
identify these pathogens. So just like I said, these pathogens, attack in a different way. Same way the body also produces proteins that also identify these proteins as well. And like we said, the innate immune system is not specific. It doesn't,
Okay.
it just wants to get rid of all these pathogens in the body and making sure that, okay, we are healthy. And that's
So,
one.
for example, it's like if you have, let's say, I think you made mention about like the skin,
Yeah.
being one of the main physical barriers. So, does that mean if I have a paper cut or I have an injury, it's going to make it way easier for pathogens to really attack me and kind of cause my innate immune response to also respond immediately?
Yeah, so when we have a cut, again, our body is exposed because these
Okay.
pathogens can easily penetrate. And what the immune system does is that they rush to that side of where we have a cut, and again, try to destroy anything that comes in. It's just like we have protection on our body and somebody penetrates it. Or let's say maybe our door in the house, there's a hole.
Mm-hmm.
What the body, what we try to do is try to respond to fix it. Same thing, that's what the immune system does, because again, they want to hinder any sort of pathogen from being able to have access to the body. So again, that's the response of the innate immune system.
So I think, yeah, you made a good point about it's like when we have a cat that's first respondent. So is it possible that we could have exposure to viruses like the flu or have an injury and the innate immune response fail to act?
They will always act. So again,
Okay.
once, like I said, the immune system responds irrespective of whether it's bacteria or viruses. So
Okay.
again, that which will lead us to our second part when we talk about how the adaptive immune system works. So for
Okay.
example, when we have flu infections, the interferons, are released to that site of infection to block the spread of viruses. We know how viruses can replicate and again spread and invade our cells. And again, what the immune system does is to attack those infected cells that, again, the
Right.
viruses are able to penetrate into, and again, try to get rid of those cells, and again, those viruses, again, which leads us to the tail end when we talk about apoptosis, cell death, and so on.
So that means from the surface side, there's so many things. It starts first by us getting exposed to different pathogens, like you said, viruses, bacteria. And then, like from your discussion, our skin and other physical barriers will try to limit it first. And they are all
Mhm.
part of the innate immune response, which would always respond in a way, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
So is it based on that, how come some people really get really vulnerable? Some people are vulnerable. So we all experience the flu season,
Yeah.
and you get exposed to all these different viral particles, but some people seems to be very vulnerable. They would get really sick from the flu. Others, they may not probably show any symptoms or not. Does that mean their innate immune response is much quicker or stronger than the other person? What is the meaning for such situations?
So how we respond to, again, these pathogens differ, and that also plays a role in our genetics. So
Okay.
again, some of us have good genetics whereby, our body's able to respond to these infections rapidly.
Mm.
And also, some of us have a relaxed immune system whereby, over a period of time, we are not exposed to these pathogens, our body is not able to fight. So think about it in this way, or another way which I think about it is, think when let's say we're in a city and we have police
Okay.
officers, and for months and months, there's no robbery, there's nothing. At some point, they'll be like, we don't have jobs to do. Let's just go
Right.
look at something else. Compared to whereby you're looking at a city in New York, whereby there's active activity in terms of
Go
crime
on.
and
Okay.
all. Police are always, the 911, it's on every minute. Once you go to those bigger cities, you're hearing the police always responding to something. So that's how
Okay.
we can compare a relaxed immune system compared to immune system that is active. But also our genetics also have a role to play. So again,
Okay.
when it comes to talking about those proteins, how our body is able to produce them, those immune-related cells, again, we all differ, and that's what genetics is all about. Again, we're similar in some sort, but again, how our genetic makeup are totally different, and how we respond to this infection is totally different. I usually tell my students, giving an example, for example, COVID-19. Some people were
Mm.
hospitalized. Some people are still in the hospital up until today. They are never able to recover, from COVID. That's because the immune system was very relaxed. And also we can look at it also at an age point. The older you are, the more relaxed your immune system is, and it's the less or difficult it is to respond to some of these pathogens. And that's why most people will tell you that the older people are more vulnerable to these
Okay.
diseases and these pathogens compared to young individuals who have a more rapid response to this infection.
Oh, so that's a very interesting point. So aside being exposed to these pathogens, there are other factors like you just indicated, like genetics, age,
Mhm.
whether young or much older, which could also play in our immune system as well, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
again, our age and again, our genetics and the environment in which we live also
Okay.
has a major role to play on how our body responds to this infection.
Okay. So, Dr. K, you also made a mention about how the immune system is in two different groups, like the innate, which is the body's front line, and then the adaptive, which is like the smart army, which we'll come talk about later on. Do they work together, or is it a situation where if the innate immune response is able to take care of business, then the adaptive doesn't have to worry? How does the two work together to make sure that immune response is resolved to take
So
care of a
again,
pathogen?
so like I said, the immune system is divided into two. One is, quick to respond. One builds based on the experience built, over time. Then
Mm.
if we're exposed to those pathogens, our body can also respond. So how do they differ? So like I said, one is a rapid response, one builds memory, the other doesn't. So the adaptive immune system is the second line of defense when it comes to how our body responds to pathogens. So again, it improves over time. And again, just like we talked about the key components of the innate immune system, when we look at the adaptive immune system, we're looking at T cells, B cells,
Mm.
we're looking at antibodies, and also we're looking at memory cells. For example, we're looking at cytokines and we're looking at antibodies and so on. So again, the the adaptive immune system builds memory, a recollection of what happens. Another example, just like I also tell my student, is let's play a scenario whereby we have some intruder come into our building. Again, we've not
Okay.
experienced it before. How we respond is how, at that instant, is how our innate immune system would respond. But over
Okay.
time, because we have experience, if we also are exposed to that same situation, again, we will respond in a different way because we know how to act. And again, we know what tools and again, what cells. And again, that's where antibodies come into play to ensure that, again, we build a strong immune system.
Oh, great. So I think that's a good point in terms of how the two interplay. Is there any means for us to measure this system? So, is there a way like clinical or diagnostic tools to help us to measure the innate immune systems? Because I think some of your research has extensively looked at, different genes I think one of your papers you showed different gene profile receptors and different protein cytokines and chemokines. Could they also be considered like a diagnostic tool to measure? And what are some of the other tools that can really give us a little bit insight? Because this is more on the biology detail side of the molecular level. But for the non-science person, are there tools that can help us measure these innate immune function as well?
Yeah. So when we look at the innate immune system, just like we said, what are those key players that, ensure that, again, our body is able to fight? So I gave an example by talking about neutrophils. So when we go to the
Okay.
hospital, the doctors collect our blood sample, and if they see a high neutrophil count, that means your
Okay.
body's producing a lot of them to fight infection. So again, we can test that, okay, our body is fighting something, again, when we see a high neutrophil cell count.
Okay.
But again, when it comes to adaptive immune system, again, they can be done through tests. For example, we can do antibody tests, we can do T cell counts, we can do a lot of assay, we can do flow cytometry to detect the presence of those proteins, or do ELISA
Okay.
to detect the presence of those proteins. And again, also going back to the innate immune system. Again, just like we said, these pathogens attack in a specific way. So does our body respond in a different way in terms of the proteins that are being produced. So for
Okay.
example, bacteria, the body will produce toll-like receptor 4, again, which is responsible to recognize bacterial cells. So again,
Okay.
whereby we see a high production of those receptors, again, that just tells us that our body is fighting and, again, trying to produce those cells or those proteins or those genes that would help us fight those type of infections. Again, there are a lot of tests. So again, think about it when we go to the hospital. They check our
Okay.
temperature. Okay, we have a fever. Okay, it means
Mm.
somebody's fighting something. Those are the common, like, simple tests that we can do. But also they collect our blood samples. Again, like I said, they could, like, check your white blood cells, white blood cell count. They could collect your plasma. All they have to do is centrifuge your blood, and again collect, plasma, and again test for these proteins or these biomarkers that are associated with some of these diseases, and able to diagnose what the actual pathogen will be. Either do you have a bacterial infection or you have a viral infection, and the doctor is able to prescribe some sort of medication to you as well.
That's good to know, because like that means there's so many different means for us to know that our immune system, whether it's robust or not. So that's very interesting. You touch base on the adaptive immune system that is able to learn from memory, like recollection from that. How is it able to do that? Because from my understanding, from what you were saying, it means, for example, I can be exposed to a pathogen, get sick, and then the recovery would allow my system to be able to keep a memory of that. Now, the next time I have similar infection is going to rely on past reflection of the past infection. So, how is our body or our immune system able to do that? How does it learn to do that?
So over time, it's able to, again, recognize, just like I said, build those memory cells. So it creates memory cells that recognize pathogens, and again, it's able to respond to them quickly, just in case we're exposed to some of those pathogens again. And again, that's how we also create vaccines. So
Okay.
again, vaccines, so we can mimic, what the actual virus will be. Our body will respond to that, and then memory cells are created. And once those memory cells are created, once we're exposed to those pathogens again, we're able to fight them. So it's just more of like, building knowledge and building memory.
Okay.
And those cells are able to know, okay, once I'm exposed to either virus or bacteria or protozoa, fungi, again, I know how to fight it. So our body is
Lovely.
able to build those memory cells that help us to, fight those pathogens whenever we encounter them as well.
So, Dr. Kingsley, does it tie into the reason why we have like flu shots? Because I know that, the flu season, like the flu shot you took last year, you need a new one for now. So, does
Yeah.
that tie into us training our immune system for this new flu vaccine? Just to
Yeah.
get,
So again,
okay.
yeah, so it ties to how the more reason why we take those flu shots. And some
Okay.
people, just like you said, some people take the flu shots, they don't respond to them, or their body doesn't react to. Some people do. Or what is done is trying to prime our body. again, to
Okay.
enable to build those memory cells, build those antibodies, again, which again, the flu shot or whatever, however we respond to it, again, it's not as drastic at what the main pathogen will be when we encounter them. So that once we do, again, our body's able to, those antibodies, that's where our adaptive immune system comes into play, and again, able to deal with that situation. And again, whatever effect we have is not more adverse, again, compared to,
Okay.
or severe compared to what we might encounter when we expose the natural virus or the virus itself.
Okay, so that means like naturally there's a natural immunity based on what we are getting exposed to, and then through the vaccines we're kind of getting like an artificial induced immunity. And from what you just inferred, getting the flu shot and then building immunity does not necessarily mean when we encounter the real thing, that's how it's going to be.
Say that.
Correct?
Yes. So again, once our body, how we also build immunity, just like you said, it could be natural, it could be
Okay.
artificial. Again, natural, it's done when we actually get exposed to the infection. So again,
Okay.
I recall when, COVID, some people was like, okay, let's just have, you know, be exposed to this virus and build
Okay.
natural immunity or herd immunity. But then when we're looking at artificial, again, it's going through either vaccines or antibody treatments. At some points, people that were exposed to the virus, donated their blood, and again, they were, the did transfusion or plasma transfusion, whereby again those plasma were rich in antibodies that again would also confer adaptive immunity to those individuals that are sick. So again,
Okay.
this could be developed naturally, again when we're
Okay.
exposed to these viruses or these pathogens, or officially whereby we're able to either get antibody treatments or again through vaccines. And again, that's why I'm one of those individuals that encourage us getting our vaccines.
Okay. Okay. That's kind of like an interesting perspective that, sometimes when we've not built the natural, the vaccines would kind of help us still prep
Mm-hmm.
the body, getting ready for that. I like your analogy about the police, so I'm thinking about how sometimes there's peace, there's no war, but they are still preparing and
Yeah.
making sure that they are ready in terms of anything. Are there things that we can do? Because I found interest in one of your papers how you use different natural products to help boost the immune system for your animal models that you use for your study. And that was really interesting because it means even before our immune system face any challenge or pathogen, we can prime it. I think one of your papers highlighted like using like probiotics to be able to prime the immune system.
Mhm.
Can you speak more to that?
So again, just like you said, it's just like that's one thing I like about the United States military system. You don't wait till war for you to start preparing. You prepare before so that once the war starts, again, you're fully ready to attack and again defeat your enemy. And that's how our bodies should be able to fight. And what we discovered is that there are a lot of natural modulators that can help, our cells, our animals that we work with to build a strong immune system. So when I'm talking about strong immune system, what are those proteins or those genes that need to be expressed, whether at a higher level or a lower level, to enable these animals or we humans, whenever we're exposed to these pathogens, be able to fight them. So for example, one of my studies that I looked at used mushroom probiotics, and again, it helped produce a high amount of toll-like receptors. And again, what
Okay.
do we say toll-like receptors? They recognize these pathogens, they bind to them, and again, they're able to signal, recruit chemokines, cytokines that help get rid of these pathogens. So that's what we naturally do to ensure that, again, for our animals, again, we don't want to be giving drugs. Some people are against the use of vaccines. But again,
Okay.
vaccines are good, but again, we could also have alternatives. And then this, we use these natural modulators, diet. What again can we use and to modulate the expression of these genes? And if I recall, you also published a paper that talked about how we can use plant extracts, again,
Right.
tannins, again, to modulate the system. And again, not just helping them fight immunity, but also looking at other effects. For example, you looked at methanogens. How can these plant products help reduce methanogens? So if we diverse a little bit, again, we're also talking about climate change. How can we also reduce some of these adverse effects that, again, animals produce and, again, also help combat? So it's like more of, killing two birds with one stone.
So
Again,
it's like
building
a
immunity,
win-win.
yeah, and also
Okay.
reduce other adverse effects that could also arise using some of these models as well.
Very interesting. I think, based on your feedback, I'm kind of looking at some of the interactive questions that I got from students way ahead of time. And
Yeah.
one of them is about all these like autoimmune diseases. Is it possible? Because I think you've kind of given us very specific details that the immune system is able to recognize pathogens and being able to distinguish like itself from non-self. So if that is the case, how come sometimes it attacks our own cells through like autoimmune diseases where, the immune system is attacking the host cell itself?
So again, sometimes we've seen whereby, again, we see mutation occur, one. So sometimes we see these cells also produce other proteins that, again, the body's not able to recognize as a foreign entity. So for example, we see pathogens also produce proteins, again, trying to mimic the other good proteins within the cell. So again, we see that happen. And again, that's why we see some of these results happen. And again, they are rare cases, but again, when they happen and we recognize them, we're able to find ways to mitigate and also try to treat, again, develop drugs that would also help fight some of these diseases as well.
Interesting. I think I have another student question here and is asking about, students, they study a lot and exams period, end of semester period, there's a lot of stress going on. Can stress really weaken the immune system? I think that's one of my questions. Like stress and lack of sleep. So that's one student's question
So
because
stress is a major factor. So I like the question because the other day I was talking to my students and we're looking at different stresses. So
okay,
nutritional stresses. So
nutrition.
overeating, undereating, heat
Okay.
stress. So think about it, when you're exposed to extreme heat, how do
Mm,
you react? You're restless, your body's, so even when we look at our animals, I'll give you an example for animals. When it comes to how we breed, again, if I
mm,
collect semen from a boar under stress, again, that semen is not of good quality because the animal is stressed.
right.
Also, when we're exposed to stress, our immune system is somewhat relaxed, and which
Mm,
also makes us prone to, when we are being exposed to these pathogens, again,
okay.
we are being attacked severely. So again, stress is a major factor. That's why we try as much as possible to avoid stressing the animals, or again, trying to know ways in which we can handle them, understand their
Mm,
behavior, and use that to our own advantage to also be able to handle them. As humans, if we are stressed, again, the symptoms we display, again, just tells us that, again, that has a major role to play, on our
okay.
body. So whether you deprive yourself of sleep, which I encourage everyone to at least get 6 hours of sleep, because again,
Okay.
you need that. Like our body's like a computer system. You need it to
Mm,
shut down, get this rest, and again, be energized to do its work. Whereby it's not, again, sometimes when you're running a computer over a period of time, what happens? It's overheated. It becomes hot.
right.
So that just tells us how our body will react. We develop fever, we become stressed, migraine, and once
Mm,
we're exposed to all these symptoms, again, that could expose us to that, our immune system will be somewhat compromised, that once we're exposed to these pathogens, our body's not able to fight. Think about a policeman that, can't chase a robber, someone that,
mm.
it's, running. If they can't run and catch the thief, that defeats the
Yeah, the
purpose
thief
of
is
them.
gone.
Yeah, so again, if they are stressed, they can catch whoever they. So stress has
Right.
a major role to play on our body. So as much as possible, I encourage you students, make sure you take some time off, have a good schedule, plan yourself, avoid any form of stress, drink a lot of water, make sure you
Okay.
get your sleep. Again, the good thing about our devices these days is that we can use it to our own advantage because it can tell us when to shut down and when to start up. So again, set a timer for yourself that once it's 11 p.m. or 10 p.m., shut down. I want you to go off. And then once it's 7 a.m., I want you to come back on because I need to sleep in order to get, or eliminate any form of stress. Because if your body's exposed to stress, again, it affects your productivity as well.
That's very interesting perspective. I have another question, whether is a myth or a fact about the immune system. The immune system can be inherited from your parents. Would you consider that to be a myth or a fact?
Of course, yes, we can. It's a fact. A good immune system can be inherited. Again, most of our parents, that's what they owe us, to give us a good immune system. But how well can we prolong that good, healthy immune system? There are a lot of factors that have a role to play. Remember that we are what we eat, one. So what you eat could also affect how your immune system functions. So if you inherit something, it's just like when we inherit wealth from our parents. If you manage it well, you can produce more good things with that wealth. But if you don't manage it properly, everything goes down the drain. That's how our body, when it comes to how we manage our immune system. Yes, we inherit good immune system from our parents, but again, remember that, again, how we take care of our body also has a role to play. Our diet, just like we talked about, sleep, exercising, are we taking our vaccine? When our body's exposed to these infections, how do we react to them? So again, we can inherit a good immune system, but again, how do we manage that immune system, has a major role to play.
So I think that's a very interesting perspective, because I have another question from another student on, how when COVID started and how we're all like wearing masks, quarantine, 6 feet, like all these measures in place. I think we talked about herd immunity in one of our other class conversations, and the epidemiology. How would you explain that? When it comes to immunity, I think most of our conversation had been about individual immunity. How would you explain that in context of immunity for the population when it comes to how we experience COVID, for example?
Yeah, so again, I think I give an example talking about how, some people were of the theory that we should all get exposed to these viruses so that we can build herd immunity. And one thing we know that when enough people are immune, the disease can spread, easily.
Okay.
Because again, we're able to protect those that, again, did not get their vaccines and so on. So once we have herd immunity, once again, we're able to, so think about these pathogens, they're looking for where to thrive and survive. But whereby we all have, that adaptive immunity we've talked about, whereby we have antibodies, our body has built recollection of how to fight these pathogens. When we're exposed to them, we get rid of these pathogens. So it prevents that pathogen from affecting the next person. So that's what herd immunity is all about. And again, that's how we've been able to fight some of these pathogens or some of these diseases, by building herd immunity. Now, COVID is a thing of the past, or I'll say somewhat, because again, now we have vaccines being developed that will help us. Again, I encourage everyone to get their vaccines. Two, we've also been able to build herd immunity, whereby our body now understands this virus, so that when we're exposed to it, again, we're able to, produce more antibodies that, again, they're able to fight, the pathogen.
Those pathogens. So if I get you correctly, our individual immune system, as we pay attention to them, making sure like we eat right, we sleep right, we have a good routine, as it builds both all these good proteins, cells for our immune system individual, would also play into ensuring herd immunity if that is needed along the way, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of interesting to know that within our population, in our community, whatever happens to us on the individual level also plays a role if herd immunity is required or needs to be achieved for certain disease types. Another student also had a question about cancer. So, we have friends, loved ones, um, who may be experiencing cancer. And this question was, is the immune system not able to fight cancer? Why chemotherapy?
So again, there are a lot of treatments and there are a lot of therapies. And again, I think there are ongoing research on how the body is able to fight. So when we look at cancer, again, these are continuous cells that are growing and multiplying. And again, when I usually tell my students, we go back all the way to genetics when we talk about mitosis and meiosis, how cells are completely, multiplying. So again, the body is able to recognize it some sort, but again, not rapidly able to, again, get rid of those cells because, again, they are continuously multiplying. And that's where chemotherapy comes into play to enable, help, the proliferation of those cells. So again, our body is fighting, again, just like when we, see someone that has cancer, again, there are other, symptoms that are attributed to those cells multiplying. Our body's trying to fight and again deal with it. But again, chemotherapy will help again reduce how those cancerous cells are actually dividing and also multiplying as well.
Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. I think I had a last question from one student about are there people in our world who never get sick? That means it's like, whether it's flu, common cold, they don't experience any of that, even though they get exposed to, viruses, bacteria in our everyday life. Are there people like that? Because some people, they don't get sick. And how did those people like build that kind of immune system? Is it really achievable?
So again, sometimes I think that might be an exaggeration when we say some
Okay.
people don't get sick. You know, they might not respond or their body is not able to, again, we're not able to see those symptoms or they have those symptoms, but they're not severe. So
Okay.
again, there's nobody that you'll tell me that hasn't had a fever before. How they react to that fever may be different from how me and you react to that. People have migraine, some people have inflammation, and so on. So we all get sick, but how our body is able to react to it, again, which is where we talked about, inheritance, how we're able to inherit a strong immune system to enable us fight it. Again, sometimes when you see those people, when we talk about, which takes us to nutrigenomics, how our body or what we eat in response to the genes that our body is able to express to enable us fight some of these diseases. So again, they have a strong immune system. They might respond to infection differently, but again, we are all exposed and our body reacts to infection differently. They might not end up in the hospital. They might just take a Tylenol and they're good. But again, we all are exposed to pathogens and our body reacts to them differently. That's why, as much as possible, we want to do the things that would help us have a very strong immune system. Making sure we're eating the right food, making sure we're getting our rest, making sure our environment is clean. Because just like we talked about those pathogens, I usually tell my students the best form of treatment is prevention. And how do we prevent? Again, is to ensure that we disrupt the life cycle of these pathogens. If we know that viruses, so for example, I tell myself when we go to the store and we buy meat, we don't put it on the countertop for 2 or 3 days because we put it there. The environment promotes the growth of bacteria and these pathogens to grow. Where do we put it? In the freezer, because the temperature doesn't promote the growth of the pathogens. So again, we have to understand these pathogens, understand their life cycle, understand what environment is suitable for them, and also try as much as possible to get rid of them or disrupt their life cycle. And again, good sanitation practice, again, is also very, very advisable for everyone.
But okay, this is kind of like a very in-depth and interesting conversation where, I like the direction of the prevention because I think one of our conversation in one of our lecture class, we're talking about like all these different medications that are in the market, different drugs that are on the market, and the fact that, usually we get sick and then we have to rely on medication and how sometimes like we're being exposed to all these different medications that our body is handling. And now from your perspective, our immune system can fight for itself where we get to a point we don't even need these medication anymore. So what would be your final thoughts or advice especially for students and especially for people who are working, like you mentioned, stress, sleep, like different things that we do that is causing us not to have that robust immune system. What will be your final thoughts and advice to to us on the topic of building a good immune intelligence for our body?
So again, pay attention to your body. We all know our body individually and how we, take care of it. It should be like how we protect our money in the bank, or maybe we have some sort of investment, how we protect it as well. So do those things that your body needs to thrive in terms of making sure you get your sleep, making sure you're paying attention to your diet. And again, which I think it's more popular now. People are paying attention to what they eat, making sure
Mm,
they're eating healthy stuff. Again, when you go, I think which is one also advantage of social media. Now the social media will be able to market some of those products that are
yeah.
beneficial to us, whereby we can get all the nutrients that our body needs to thrive. So again, making sure you're paying attention to your body, knowing when to take a break, knowing when to take that trip, relax and come back, knowing when, okay, this is bedtime, I need to sleep, I need to drink water, I need to make sure, again, if I need, to take my vaccine, I need to do that. If I need to take my shots, I need to do that as well. Also preparing your body to ensure that, again, whenever we're exposed to these pathogens, we're able to fight them. So I'll say pay attention to your body, do what you think it's good for your body. Again, don't put in those things that in your body that will cause an adverse effect or enable you to break down or lead you to any to be stressed. So again, as much as possible, avoid all those stressors that would affect your body, because again, it helps it enables you to have a relaxed immune system. And again, when you're exposed to pathogen, again, the adverse effects again could be detrimental. So again, as much as possible, take care of your body, and know what's right for your body as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ekwemalor. We will take care of the stressors and make sure that our body is able to build the good immune intelligence that is supposed to be, which is so robust. And the body can take care of itself. I think I like all the different perspective you've given us about how we are faced daily with different pathogens, viruses, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and then how our body has its own intelligence. It can go through surveillance, it can detect them, and it can destroy them. And I think you also touched base on the fact that it uses the innate and adaptive immune system. I think I got you correctly. You also said the innate is like the first body's frontline respondent coming in. It's
Yeah.
non-specific, which means it's coming in to get rid of everything, whether you are virus, whether you are bacteria, it's coming in to take care of you. And I think you touched base on it that the body has receptors. One typical of them, I think you had in one of your papers about toll-like receptors on the surface, which is able to detect in there. I think you made a good clarification about the fact that the different types is able to recognize whether it's bacteria or a virus or this. So that is really important. That means the immune system really have intelligence
Yeah.
because in the mind, when we get exposed to all these different microbes, it's not all being detected the same way. The body
Yeah.
is so intelligent that it knows that this is virus and this is like, even if it's a bacteria. I think one of your papers you highlighted toll-like receptor 2 for gram positive and
Mhm.
toll-like receptor 4 for gram negative, and I think for viruses it was toll-like receptor 3 and 7 and 8, depending on what genetic information you have. Like listening to the conversation, our immune system is really intelligent. And
Yeah.
if we take care of the stressors, that will definitely help us to build a robust immune system. Thank you so much. I think we have a couple of other questions, but I'm going to share with you and then you'll be able to give us feedback. And then we'll share back with the students on like how we can really build our immune system. I think some people have questions about like immune therapy and then long-term immunity.
Mhm.
I think I might probably let you end with that. Is there something like permanent immune system? Like if my
So
immune system is good today, I'm good forever. I don't have to worry about tomorrow. Is there something like that?
So again, when we talk about permanent immunity, it will mean that your body is protected against a disease for life for one exposure. So that's why sometimes, so for example, if we took, let's say we give an example for measles,
Okay.
chickenpox. If you take those vaccines, you're protected for life. But again, in some cases, there are some viruses, and we know that viruses mutate. So how our body responds to them differs. So again, which also, again, when our body is also exposed to some of these stress factors, again, which would also mean that, again, longevity, it's not, doesn't exist, because again, how they attack, or how they affect us, also different. And that's why sometimes some of these vaccines are on a yearly basis. So it might be 5 years, 10 years, take those vaccines so that you can build that permanent immunity against those diseases. And again, we see that we're facing a measles challenge, especially here in the United States. So I encourage everyone to make sure they take their vaccines. Again, take the flu shots. Again, if whenever you're exposed to the flu, you respond to them in a different way. Again, make sure you're taking those things again to build that permanent immunity.
Thank you so much. I think I've learned a lot from different perspectives, especially how you've been able to connect the science to know the everyday life, how we should see our immune system, and how we can even contribute through like what we eat, our lifestyle, and even taking advantage of vaccines and some of the other provision out there to help us to build a robust immune system. Dr. Kingsley, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you,
today
Dr.
and for
Sarah, for
answering
having me.
all the questions. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to having you again for further discussion on different other interesting topics in science, especially gaining perspective into your research area, just for us to see, from the textbook to real life, how some of these conversations really pertain. So we
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
I'm happy to come by to share some of my research with your students as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah.